Hey, Brewers fans, you're welcome.
You are Locked On A's, your daily Oakland A's podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, A's fans, and welcome to Locked On A's, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about your Oakland A's all season long. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, which is right around the corner, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Follow us at Locked On A's on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram at Locked On A's. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Maybe having a little bit of technical issues on this show, but do you what? I'm getting it out of the way. I was going to record this yesterday, but here's the deal. Your pal Sully went to the dentist, and I had Novocaine in my mouth. And I was toying with the idea of recording a show with Novocaine in my mouth. And then I realized that would be awful. So here I am. It's early in the morning, and I'm recording this for you, my A's fans, listeners. Hey, I said you're welcome to Milwaukee Brewers fans, of course, because the A's went to Chicago and won a day game at Wrigley Field. And with that, the Milwaukee Brewers clinched the National League Central because the Cubs' loss officially eliminated the Cubs from contention of the Central. I always find it weird that you could have a game that played in one place that totally affects another place, but I get it. And with that, the Brewers became the champs of the NL Central. You're welcome. The Brewers had, by the way, last night, the Brewers had a true celebration when they won a walk-off game. Jackson Chourio, who is the phenom that they have, they signed long-term, hit a leadoff triple in a tie game in the ninth, and he was driven in. I listened to Bob Uecker call it, and there was a great celebration, but that was just the fun party. The formality of clinching it was because the A's dusted themselves off, and A's fans, you got to give the team credit, because even though they were humiliated by losing 2 games in Chicago to the White Sox, they came back and they won 2 games in Wrigley. And so if you said that, they had a winning road trip, and if you had said that, all right, they're going to go play 6 games in Chicago and go 3-3, you'd say, well, I guess the Cubs swept them and they swept the White Sox. But when you consider they went 3-3 and losing the 2 games to the White Sox, that's pretty good. And especially a game like that happened on Wednesday afternoon, because the A's got the A's got the scoring starting early. Soderstrom hit an opposite field home run into the bleachers, but there was the 5th inning was a little sloppy and a little frustrating, and Nick Allen almost made a great play that would have been a double play to end the inning when he tried to field the Dansby Swanson play. And if he had fielded it, he'd be able to step on third and throw to first all in one motion and end the inning. Instead, he couldn't field it. Now, I'm not going to blame Nick Allen. And by the way, it was not recorded as an error, which I think is strange, but it was a physical error. It wasn't a mental error. He was doing the right thing. It just clanked off his glove. Physical errors happen. You don't like the boneheaded mental errors. That's what you don't want to see. And Nick Allen had the right idea. Just it didn't work out. And then that tied the game. And then Suzuki singled, and then there was a sack, the deep sack fly to Cameron, and they made it 3-1. And I had the game on, and I was watching that part of the game during my lunch break in my classroom. And I have to say, I have to admit, when it was 3-1, I started shaking my head saying, this is not going to be our day. And whenever the A's win a game that at one point I legitimately think this is not our day, I'm thrilled. And I tell you what, I'm especially thrilled when they do it without the long ball. Now, of course, Rooker got on base 4 times and drove in a run and stole a base because that's what he does. But it was little things like the ground out by Butler and Rooker, who tied the game, but it was a little dribbler to third. A lot of weird things happened yesterday with ground balls to third. And the fact that the A's manufactured those 2 runs, they just didn't wait back for someone to hit the long ball. That's the key. That's been the key to the A's this whole rest of this year, is that can they score runs without the long ball? Soderstrom did hit the home run, yes, and how happy we are for him there. But the fact of the matter is they didn't have to rely on the long ball to tie the game, and they got the Geloff double to take, and they really allowed only that one bad inning to the Cubs. Now, Basso, that forced Basso out, but think about what Hallman, Ferguson, Tanez, and Miller all did. Hallman had 2 inherited runners. Neither of them came in. And then Ferguson, Tanez, and Miller all pitched clean innings. By the way, none of them allowed a hit. Ferguson allowed a walk, Miller allowed a walk, but the rest of the time, nope. They let them off there. They did not allow a rally of any way, shape, or form, which is great. And by the way, and with that, and the Geloff double gave him the lead. It was Miller time, and with that, the Cubs got eliminated from the division. And the Cubs were, by the way, the consensus pick to win the National League Central, because it didn't look like many other teams were going for it. And lest we forget, they traded away their ace and they lost their manager. The Brewers lost their manager. The Brewers traded away their ace and lost their manager to the Cubs. And the Cubs made a bunch of big acquisitions, and they're like, oh, well, this is going to be the Cubs' year. And the A's said, nope, not going to happen. Toodaloo. A couple of the quick things, we all know Rooker has a great home run total. His RBI total is now up to 110 for those who still like RBI. His batting average, for those who still like batting average, is at 304. His OPS is at 960. He now has 11 stolen bases. It's funny, if he had just picked up like a couple of stolen bases here or there, we might be thinking of him as a 30-30 man, or 20, or 30-20 man. Maybe 30-30 is a bit much. But there we go. Good solid win for the A's in terms of dusting themselves off. The humiliation of that series against the White Sox. You gotta move on from that. And now the A's have an off day here on the 19th, which is the anniversary of two distinct there's 2 distinct anniversaries on the 19th that we're going to talk about. And then they're flying back, and the Yankees, who, by the way, clinched a playoff spot last night, but have bigger fish to fry as they're trying to win the division, although the Orioles are making it that very easy for them too, in case you haven't been figuring that out. And so we're going to see what happens. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the final homestand, and the fact that this is the anniversary of 2 distinct moments in athletics history. Let's hear from our new friends at Arena Club. Now, I'm a big card collector. My mom's listening to this. She knows that there's boxes and boxes and notebooks of cards. For those of us who like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Mike Trout rookie card just isn't in the cards. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. But thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of the retail price. Every card I listed was hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides a real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent, with a full grade rationale provided an explanation of how your card was scored. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting platform you'll have to check out. Right now, you'll get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnMLB and use code LockedOnMLB. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnMLB, code LockedOnMLB for 10% off of your first purchase. This is the anniversary of two very distinct moments in athletics history, September 19th. And I remember September 19th, 1988, very well, thank you very much. The Oakland Athletics clinched the 1988 division. They won the National League West on this day in 1988. And it was a foregone conclusion. It wasn't a lot of tension in terms of whether we're going to win the West that year. I remember watching the game in my living room. I was in high school at the time in Palo Alto. And it was not like, oh God, they're really having a great pennant race against the Twins and everything. No, the Twins were a good team that year. They were the defending World Series champs. They were actually better in 88 than they were in 87. But the A's ran away with it. However, it was a big moment for the team. They had the great run they had in the 70s, which I was too young to remember. And then they had the Billy Ball year, which was weird because the clinching of that division was done because of the split season of 81. Now, A's fans did get to have the first division series that was put in there because of the split season. The A's wound up beating the Royals, and there was a big celebration on the field and everything like that before getting swept by the Yankees in the ALCS. But that felt like a fluke. That felt like, okay, yeah, the A's made the playoff in 81, but that was the Billy Ball fluke. They got Billy Martin for a couple of years. They squeezed one division title, then he went back to the Yankees. By the way, in 88, Billy Martin was the manager back managing the Yankees. He didn't finish the season. He got fired midway through the year because that's how things happen. But the A's winning the division in 88 felt like, okay, this could be something that happens for a while. This is not a fluke division like in 81, and this is not something that happened way back when. This is the A's being an elite team, and they're not going anywhere. It was a sense of this team is special because this is not going to be a one and done. You could see the combination of Canseco, McGuire, Dave Stewart, Dennis Eckersley, Terry Steinbach, Carney Lansford, Dave Henderson. They were going to be, Mike Gallego, Tony Phillips, going around the horn on that team, Bob Welch. And this is before they got Ricky Henderson. This is before they got Mike Moore. You could tell from the 88 team, which arguably was the strongest team. I think the 90 team was the strongest team that got swept by the Reds, but I digress. But you got the sense of, okay, there's going to be a bunch of Octobers. They had that was the beginning of the true glory times for the A's in a way that we haven't seen since Connie Mack. And yes, I'm including the Finley years because you had management that was doing it right, that was putting a great product on the field, that was putting a great show on the field, that was putting on a sense that they were going to spend money on the team, they were going to keep the players together, and you can get used to some of these names. It's not going to be, yes, the Moneyball years and the fun times that A's fans had in the late 2010s were fun, but there was a revolving door of names. You couldn't get attached to them. You could get totally attached to all those players from the La Russa days. And the division title was step one. And that happened on this day, September 19th, 1988. Well, September 19th is also the anniversary of a very different day in A's history. On this day in 1954, the A's played their final game at Connie Mack Stadium in Philadelphia. You know how this is going to be the end of the Oakland A's, I think. I don't know. It looks like it is, but there's a possibility it won't. And there's going to be a great clamoring. There's going to be a great goodbye celebration. The place is going to be packed. I already have my ticket. But in September 19th, 1954, where it wasn't official they were moving yet, but it was pretty clear they were on the way out somewhere. Do you know how many people showed up to see the Yankees beat the A's 6-5? It was actually a close game. 1,834 people. That many people watched my last video, just so you know, or listen, more than that, listen to my last episode than there were to see the final Philadelphia A's game. They were playing the Yankees, who, by the way, were not the American League champions that year. That was over the few years of the 50s. They didn't. The Cleveland Indians, that's what they were called. Cleveland Indians won the pennant that year. By the way, the A's were 58 games out of first place. That's nearly 2 months out of first. The Yankees were a very good team that year, and it was a back and forth game, and finally was a 6-5, and it was less than 2,000 people showed up. And the Mack family, and Connie Mack was no longer the manager. They finally realized this is ridiculous, and the Mack sons were in control of the team. I use control very loosely, and the team went. There was no great celebration. There was no great nostalgia. It was just, they're gone. The team is out. And look, say what you want about Oakland fans and say what you want about the support over the last bunch of years. But I guarantee you, the A's are going to do better than that. A's fans are going to support the team and say goodbye to the team better than they did in Philadelphia. You know, I saw that the final game at the Polo Grounds, the home of the Giants in all those years, and when the Mets played there the last year before they moved from the Polo Grounds to Shea Stadium, the Mets, again, about 2,000 people showed up to watch the final game. And me, I'm such a baseball nostalgia person that the idea of seeing a team seeing a great old stadium for the last time is something I would love to go back and see. And that to have that chance and only 2,000 people doing it, well, we're going to beat that at the Coliseum. When we come back, I want to look back at really the last gasp, and we didn't realize it was the last gasp of real pennant fun for A's fans. Let's hear from our friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk about FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. We'll have something a little different for you right now. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. Say that 3 times fast. All you'll need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com. Download America's #1 sportsbook. Hey, thanks again for making Locked On A's your first listen. Check out my other show, Locked On MLB. I'm here to prepare for the Fall Classic. I've got it every single day. You can find the link to the Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Well, the last gasp of A's fans in Oakland seeing their team as a contender was a couple years ago. And, it's people forget that in 2018, 2019, and the COVID year, the 2020, the A's were a playoff team each year. They had a nice team. They were a competitive team. And in 2021, for most of that year, the A's were a playoff team. They were in first place in the division through mid-June, and they were a wild card team for most of the summer. Now, in mid-August, the A's went on a rampage. They went on an absolute rampage where they won like 11 out of 13 games or something like that. I don't remember the exact amount, but they were just stampeding through teams. They just swept the Rangers. They just swept Cleveland, and they beat Cleveland 17-0. And they were only a game and a half out of first place in mid-August. And it looked like they had a chance to overtake the Astros. And then there was the famous home runs by Marcus Semien when he was playing for Toronto, and they lost a critical series to the Rangers, and then went on a horrible stretch. They went on a horrible stretch where they went like 4-10 or something crazy. Like, I don't have the exact, but I read there was like they only won 2 games out of 2 weeks, where it was critical. But then they had a good stretch again, and they went on a 5-game winning streak. And on the 10th of September, they beat Texas 10-5 and were within 1 game of a playoff spot in mid-September. And they actually had a decent run, but then things fell apart. And it's one of those things that we didn't realize it then. There have been rumors and whispers of the A's moving since the late 1970s, probably before that. But they were, you looked at that team and said, they're on the verge of doing it. They're on the verge of doing it. They had that one bad month. They had that one bad stretch. They had a mediocre August, and they had a bad September. But their bad September was going, 13-17. It wasn't like, a 9-25 type of month that they would have, So they lost that. They lost that. You thought, well, do you know what? They'll be back. They'll be back. There was a fun summer. For most of the years, the A's were one of the playoff teams, and that team had Sean Murphy and Matt Olson and Matt Chapman and Elvis Andrus. And they had Seth Brown hitting 20 home runs for them on that team. And they had a decent starting staff with Montas and Cole Irvin and Sean Manaea. Lou Trevino was closing games out. And then all of a sudden, blook, that team was broken apart. They sold many of those players away for pennies on the dollar. After that team had seemed like they had just assembled that team. And everyone got traded away. And they got back some players. They got Langoliers and Sears for some of them, but it was like, most of them, wait a minute, didn't you just put together a good team that made the playoffs a bunch of years in a row and almost made it in 2021? And people outside the Bay Area going like, why aren't fans showing up every single day? Now, because there's a sense of having the rug pulled. A sense that's been going on since Philadelphia, with the exception of that stretch that I said in 1988, when the Haas family were putting a good product on the field. They had the better of the two stadiums, and they were putting not only a winner on the field, but a winner that you could get to know. And alas, we didn't even know what was happening. We didn't even know it was our last time to see a contending A's team. Now, how would they have done in the playoffs? I don't know. That year, the Red Sox were a wild card team. It didn't look very strong and still managed to get to Game 6 of the ALCS. So maybe the A's could have gone far if they had done it. If they just had a more consistent August or September. We'll never know. We'll never know. But I'm not going to have anyone drilling any holes in my teeth today, so I'll be able to drop a podcast at the regular time. And this being the final homestand, let's do better than they did in Philadelphia. If you don't have tickets for the final game, let's pack the stadium for the weekend when the Yankees are in town. Hell, the Yankees have players that Fisher's actually heard of. So that should be fun too. So follow us at Locked On A's on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram, talking about how the A's are helping the Brewers and remembering some good and bad times from around this time, whether it was 54, 88, or 2021. This is Locked On A's. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.